We're live now. So, hello everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to On Air. My name is Jose, and I'm an open member broadcasting live from Peru. Welcome to another Juju Charm School. Today we're going to have a session about exploring Juju Run. We're here with Charles Butler, who's part of the Juju team. Say hi, Chuck.
Hello, everybody.
So the stage is all yours. Go ahead.
All right. Today we're going to talk about an interesting topic, specifically Juju Run, which is a not so well-known feature that landed in 1.17 branch, and it's got some fairly useful use cases. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And to save time, I went ahead and pre-bootstrapped an environment. So I'm going to do Juju pprint to show my nice little environment configuration here. You see that we have a MediaWiki scalable bundle deployed, and I've added 2 units to MediaWiki. So Juju Run by itself has a great help dialog, and I'm going to scale this out just a little bit. And what you see here is that Juju Run gives us the ability to execute shell commands against any service machine that we have deployed using Juju. So if you come from like a chef background, you've got all the niceties that Knife gave you to execute commands on a remote unit. And what's really nice to this is that you can execute this against all running units in your stack using the tac all flag. You can specify if you want to run against a specific environment, or you can even whittle it down to just specific machines, or deploy against all units deployed in a service. So with that being said, what I'm going to do really quickly here is I'm going to Juju SSH into my MediaWiki/1 unit, and I'm going to edit a hook file so that we've got some output going to our log. Unit MediaWiki1 cd charm hooks, and we vim config changed. And let's just add a Juju log. Hello from MediaWiki1. And with that being saved, I'm now going to exit from this environment. And I'm going to say Juju run service MediaWiki hooks/config changed. Oh, I'm still on that machine. Juju run service MediaWiki hooks config changed. And what it's doing now is it's actually connecting to the machine. It's putting me in the context of a hook environment and executing that command. So it looks like it just tanked on me. And I'm not sure why I'm getting SSH messages here about adding specific machines. So let me attack just a single unit, MediaWiki/0. And nothing in my log output because it was MediaWiki1. Looks like my pipe broke. But what we see here is that it actually did show up in our Juju log. It's coming back, and we executed it again, so it came back against. Another thing that's important to note is that this exposes more than just actually executing a hook. So say, for example, a release just came out, and I want to quickly update all of my machines. So I'll say all, and I'm going to run sudo apt-get update. And any of the output that is printed back to stdout is actually going to be shipped back to my terminal and displayed as soon as the command is finished executing. Now, you're only going to want to use Juju Run to execute kind of fire and forget things. Like, you don't want to execute vim because it'll cause the run command to hang and never actually complete. But as you see here, all of our machines just ran an apt-get update, and everything should be good to go. So now if I want to run upgrade on all of them, we're now pulling all of the latest updates across all of our machines that are deployed with Juju. And we got all of our information back. Since these are fresh deployments, there shouldn't have been anything to update. And that pretty much covers from A to Z what the Juju run command provides to you on the client. So an interesting thought about this is, say, you get this helpful output from Juju get MediaWiki, and we see all of their configuration variables spit back in a nice YAML format. But that doesn't really tell me what I've got on the server. So if I run Juju run unit MediaWiki /0, and I want to get the actual configuration values that are set, I now have the ability to pull back those values from my development workstation on the fly. If I want to get it back from all of the units, I change this from tac unit to service. And yet again, we get it specified, and it even specifies which machine is returning the output, which is kind of handy. And if I want to do it against all, this is a quick way for me to get all of the configuration options that are set against all of my machines within my Juju environment. And it looks like that didn't actually do what I thought it was going to. Okay, so interesting thing. This was a learning experience for me as well. The context in which the Juju run command gives you varies dependent on what you're targeting. So I can't run a tac all and get back the configurations, but if I run it against MediaWiki itself, I should get back all of the configuration options in MediaWiki. All right, so 5 minutes in, I think I've exhausted everything that I have to cover with just Juju Run. Are there any questions about Juju Run, what it provides for you, and how this could be handy in your workflow?
I have a question here, and I'll check in Pound Juju real quick for any other questions. No questions at the moment, so I had one if you don't mind.
Sure.
Juju Run, at what level can I be able to orchestrate my actual units? Can I be able to get to the actual Ubuntu level and start installing packages, and can I do it at the charm level, or what would be your recommendation on that?
Now, if you're going to go installing packages,
or uninstalling,
over to the charm, I would do that. I wouldn't use Juju Run as a drop-in replacement.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want to run it against a service, for example, and let's say that there's a supporting package that I want to install, like a log daemon,
so you want
something similar.
Close to it, so you don't necessarily want to always in the charm, but you're like, oh, I really want to get system tap in here for whatever reason.
Right. So one of my favorite admin tools is htop. So
Okay.
what I'll do now is against every MediaWiki unit, I'm going to install htop. And this is going to take just a moment, and we see that everything's installed. Now we've got htop running. So if I were to go to Juju SSH MediaWiki /1, and I execute htop, it completed successfully.
Okay. Kind of handy. What are some of the ways that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What are some of the ways you've used Juju Run? Have you used it from a charm-to-charm context, or more from the command line?
I use it more from the command line, and I use Juju Run implicitly from a CI server that I run in order to run deployments. Like a lot of the charms that I'm using use GitHub-based publishing, and that's a quick way for me to actually update my deployed services without having to set a configuration variable. Like I've seen some charms come in where they have like a deploy with a true or false Boolean value, and they use that to actually update their charm so they can specify if they want to deploy from head from their GitHub repository. I myself just use a Juju Run against it, and I know that in the config change hook it deploys my service. So I just run the Juju Run, target my service, MediaWiki, and I would run hooks config change.
Double tac, triple tac.
I'm sorry, what was that? Triple tac.
It was double tac.
And what that's going to do is it just execute the config change. So at that point, I'm confident that it has deployed the head revision of my software and done all the supporting roles because it puts me in the config change context.
Interesting. Okay.
Where would you put scripts? Looks like Mbruzik has a question where he would put scripts if he wants to run them with Juju Run. That's a good question. I haven't actually utilized that kind of a workflow, but my thought would be to SCP the script to the server and then run that against each node. So that prevents you from having to SSH into it and then execute those scripts.
Well, I was actually, Chuck, I was thinking about it as a charm developer. So let's say, For instance, in Hadoop, we have some scripts we want to run to make sure that Hadoop is doing what it needs to do. And where would I put these scripts as a charm developer so that I could just Juju run and execute these scripts if we want to do something like that?
That's a good point. You know, let's do some inception here. Let's kind of riff off of this and see what happens. Let's do Juju run unit media wiki /0, and I'm going to say Juju run. I don't think that this is going to work, but we're going to try it anyway. Yeah, because it has no idea. The Juju itself is not bound to that environment. You're not going to be able to do cross-unit communication using Juju run. I've only used it from a workstation point of view, not from the actual charm itself. Now, if I'm deploying a service and I want to validate that it's doing something that it says it's doing, anything that I have access to on the command line on the server, I have available to me via Juju run. So, say for example, I wanted to find out what all the running processes were on a machine. I'll execute. Let's just go back up here and let's do PSAUX, and it's going to return the output of that. So, for example, if there's a benchmark, or if I wanted to, load data into a MySQL database that's not exposed to the world, I'm free to push those files to that machine over SSH and then execute the MySQL restore using Juju run. It just prevents me from having to physically remote into that box. Yeah. It's really the time saver here, is that it allows you to execute repeatably across all of your machines at once.
Yep, but where would I push them to? What directory specifically? Can you do a Juju run?
Actually, I would put them in the charm directory, since that's where it places you. I alluded to that a little bit in the beginning. I didn't really explain why I was going to that file path.
Okay.
So whenever you execute Juju run, and I'm going to say unit media wiki 0, and I'm going to say pwd. That's going to tell me the present working directory that this command is executing in, and this is the file path on the remote server that warehouses your charm for this service. So if I were to target that path is going to change depending on the service. If I were to execute this against MySQL, my PWD is actually going to be changing. So you can either run it there, or if you just SCP it into the Ubuntu user in their home path, it will always be /home/Ubuntu/my. whatever.
Sure. That answers my question. Thank you, Chuck.
Sure, no problem. Good questions.
Tim Penny, so I think he's a Juju core developer. He was able to get Juju run to specifically look at a kind of a GitHub workflow. Specifically say, I have my charm running, and he was basically looking at a webhook from GitHub and been able to say anytime GitHub gets executed, be able to hit Juju run to be able to do a hook context to be able to reread GitHub. And so sometimes you have that in a config. Sometimes you have that in a config set. But even a config set, you're just giving it the path to the GitHub URL. So here you could be able to have Juju run, look at your GitHub repository, and say anytime my GitHub repository is updated, hit Juju run to be able to invoke my charm to pull in the latest code branch and then run it. Do you see that as a valid use case too?
I sure do. That's exactly what I was alluding to with my CI setup. CI stands for continuous integration, and every time that I run a build and push to GitHub, it fires off a webhook that tells my continuous integration server to run my unit tests. And if those pass, it executes Juju run hooks config change to actually pull down the head source on my production servers. So that way I've got an automated deployment mechanism for continuous delivery.
Very cool. I think a lot of people will be interested in that and seeing that, right? A lot of folks are saying, "Hey, I'm familiar with Jenkins. I'm working in GitHub. I got my bits deployed with Juju. How can I get them? How can I, be hitting just, git, commit, push, and be able to see these live on my server?"
That's exactly the use case that Juju run really shines.
Yeah.
It is the ability to basically bring yet another level of automation into your system orchestration. And because it's not always from within a hook that you want an action to happen. Sometimes you just literally, legitimately want to do a system administration task, and it's something quick. Like maybe it's time for me to run log rotate because I know that my log files are filling up. So you can run that from Juju run, and you've done it once. It's out of your hair. No matter if you're running one server or 1,000 servers, it's going to execute consistently across each of them.
Good to know. Good to know. I mean, that's one compelling thing to me. Our GUI team also has a GitHub lander bot who does similar things, but one of the conversations was to be able to do Juju run, to be able to invoke a tool like a GitHub Lander, which is in effect what you're doing with Jenkins, to be able to do some quality analysis on it. And if it is ship it, or if it's not ship it, it'll do specific actions. But if on ship it, be able to update your code to be able to have it run you. So that's only about 2 levels. Once you get to 3 or 4 levels of being able to have your database roll back and roll forward is where we're looking at being able to provide some additional context in Juju itself for the stack. But at least for 1 level, to be able to say, did it run my CI tests correctly, yes or no? If it is, be able to then Juju run to be able to execute an update on config changed is pretty interesting here, to me at least.
Like another use case that I've used it for is to actually restart services that appear to have been hung on my machine, which I'm attempting to do right now if I could remember the service name. I believe it's just MySQL, and as we see, it came out right here that it went to a stop staging and restarted immediately. So this is another handy use case where somebody pings you and says, hey, what's going on? The website's down. Well, just issue a quick Juju run, restart it, see if that fixes it. 9 times out of 10, it's the turn it off, turn it on again principle, right?
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
So I have a question here. Juju run, does it run commands with as root or just as a normal user?
It does execute with root permissions, and we will validate that. It comes back as root.
Awesome, thank you.
I believe that since it's dropping you in the hook context, that it's using the same runner that Juju itself would use, and that's why by default you get a root prompt. All right. I think that from A to Z, unless there's any other questions, that pretty much has exhausted what I had to talk about Juju Run today.
So George Kessler has just arrived, and let's see if he has any questions. But up to now, I think it's a very complete explanation about what Juju Run does and what Juju Run is able to help us with. As an end user, I think it can be pretty useful in terms of, as you said, restarting services as an example when a web page is not running or a server is not running.
Now, this was part 1 of a 2-part series. There is a secondary component to Juju Run that does execute server-side. I myself am just ignorant to that functionality right now, and am looking forward to part 2 of this so I can share that knowledge with everybody else.
And one of the things I like to that I've heard from folks has been able to have an auditable mechanism to be able to see what the config sets were. And I think I think there was in the 1.18 release, you can go back from a previous config set too. I think that was also in there that I saw in the release notes. So there's a lot of folks being able to figure out how did I get to this point in my deployment, and be able to have at least generate that in an automatable fashion, provide you some type of an audit log. You could be able to even do a Juju run or a script to be able to say every time a config set, make sure you pull out the config get every time on that to make sure you're actually auditing and putting it into a log and saying, I did a config set, here's where I currently look like. Config get gets me all that. So to me, that's nice to be able to have that when you're actually running production. You kind of think of these things as how do we get to this environment in a reproducible way to be able to look at what we've done to our deployment post-production. So that's another, trying to think of some good applicable uses that I've heard from folks being able to get it using. So it's also good to hear from Jose some of the uses that he has for it. I'll let any other questions check in IRC.
I'm checking hash Juju on irc.freenode.net. I think there are no questions right now, so we're good to wrap up the session right now. So are there any support channels then that people can use in case they get in trouble with Juju?
Certainly, pound Juju on irc.freenode.net. My personal handle there is LazyPower, and all you need to do is ping me. I'm more than happy to help anybody with any problems that they're having.
Mm-hmm. And feel free to file bugs at launchpad.net/Juju.
Awesome. So thank you for being here, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for hosting us, Jose. It was really good to meet you
No
virtually
worries.
too.
Goodbye.
Right. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.